Let's start with the first conversation of the day. And that has to do with the total expense ratio that you pay to mutual funds to manage the schemes that you invest in. Joining me to talk about this in more detail is Santosh Navlani, who is the COO of ET Money. Thank you so much, as always, Santosh, for taking the time, and apologies for having you wait by. Let's start with the conversation about total expense ratio first. How does this work? Because I think once people understand how this works, we can then go ahead and talk about the difference between direct and regular.
Sure. Alex, most people don't even know how mutual funds make money. And I think one of the best ways to make people understand how mutual funds make money while managing your money is the total expense ratio. Basically, it's the annual fees that a mutual fund company or a mutual fund manager levies on the scheme that you're investing your money in to basically recover their income in the process. Total expense ratio is actually calculated on a daily basis while it is communicated on an annual basis to you. So, for example, if a total expense ratio of a mutual fund scheme is 2%, divide that 2% by number of days in a year, and that is the fractional charge that is levied to you on a daily basis before the NAV is communicated to you at the end of each day as SEBI requires. So basically, depending on the fund, the expense ratio gets kind of different. It varies by scheme to scheme. As per SEBI regulations, an active equity fund can charge a max of 2.25% on an annual basis. A debt fund can charge up to 2%, and an index or a passively managed fund can charge a max of 1% per year. So these are the broader understanding of total expense ratio. But if you go deeper, it has a lot more components in the cost, and that is more important for people to understand. Basically, there are three broad divisions of this total expense ratio that a scheme has. One is the fundamentally most important, which is the management fees. So a fund manager levies a management fee on the fund, like 1% of a 2% is their fees, or 0.5% of a 2% is their fees. They will basically be paying it to fund manager to manage the fund and outperform the index, outperform the benchmark, and generate the alpha that you are hiring the fund manager for. The second component, which is a big component in the entire thing, is the commissions or distribution expenses that the fund basically is charging to the end investor and passing on as a commission to the distributor. So whenever you invest in a fund, there is something called as trailing fee that an agent or a distributor gets from the money that the mutual fund company charges, and it's basically distribution expenses. And third is operating expenses, which is a lot of communication from a fund manager goes to you when you basically invest. You involve the RTA agent, as called register and transfer agent. People know it by the names of CAMS and Carvies of the world. They're the fees to be paid to them. There is a custodian who basically keeps in charge of all the units records for yourself. There's a fees for that. There's audit fees. So operating expenses basically are the small portion of the entire piece of the puzzle. The larger expense is basically towards the fund management fee and distribution fee. And one of these component, if it goes away, which is distribution commission, you basically get something called as direct plan in the process, which we can talk later.
Absolutely. We're going to talk about it right now, Santosh, but you've broken it down very nicely. I think it's also important to point out that what you see on the screen of whatever application or brokerage that you're using, if you are invested in a mutual fund scheme, is net of that total expense ratio. So you see the gains that you have that are post the adjustment of the total expense ratio, which you explained is done on a settlement basis per day after the NAV is settled, right? So let's talk about direct and regular. This is something that the regulator introduced. And this is something that a lot of people get confused about. How do you explain this in a way that people understand? Because these names are not necessarily something that are very clear, right? Direct and regular.
Yeah. So one of the ways to understand is basically how you invest in a mutual fund. Do you invest from a mutual fund website, an AMC's own website, or you invest from a direct mutual fund app called like ET Money for that matter, or how you basically buy in physical world by going to an agent or an agent coming to you and selling the fund to you. So depends on how you buy. You basically are served a different kind of plan, if I can say that, Alex. So a regular plan is something which is I said has a total expense ratio which comprises of fund management fee, distribution fee, and operating expenses. But when you buy a direct plan, basically the distribution fees goes to zero, and what you get is a fund management fee and operating expense structure. So a regular plan fees is something basically direct plan fees plus distribution commission, or a direct plan fees can be basically total expense ratio minus the commission to be paid to distributor. So ultimately, what you pay to the distributor is what makes a regular plan for the end customer. And there is a big difference between these two, Alex. Typically, the distribution fees or a commissions on an equity fund can be as high as 0.8% to 1.2% per annum. And while these charges look small, but the fact is, over a long period of time, this 0.8 to 1.2% adding annual basis can actually become a very large sum. I'll give an example. If you invest in an SIP for a 10,000 rupees per month, and since the direct plans were launched in the country in January 2013, you would have approximately invested about 10.9 lakh rupees. And depending on the fund, an equity fund, if I can take the example of equity fund, your money could have grown to like a 22 to 25 lakh rupees. And the commission share in this entire kind of, sum would be upwards of 1 lakh rupees. So if you look at it, if you start an SIP of 10,000 rupees per month, you would actually ended up paying 10,000 rupees on an average to your mutual fund agent, which is a very large sum, almost like 1,000 rupee per month. It's a very large sum that basically people can forego in lieu of something called as an incidental advice or any kind of recommendation the fund the agent is giving you. So what we need to decide as investor is if I'm buying from an agent who has just started an SIP for me is a matter of convenience and is not giving me any kind of advice on asset allocation or fund review on an annual basis, or basically recommending any kind of changes in my investment strategy, then basically you are just paying that kind of large sum for convenience that somebody else is basically helping you invest in mutual fund. Whereas when you buy a direct plan, all this 0.8 to 1.2% can add up and basically come back to you as gains. So if you look at an XIRR or annualized return of last 9 years between any direct plan and a regular plan, you would see while the expense ratio is differing only by 0.8 to 1.2%, the compounding it gives, the returns actually differ by almost 1.3 to 1.6%. Now, that 1.3 to 1.6% is actually a large sum of almost lakh rupee on a 10,000 rupee SIP over 9 years, which your agent is earning from you. So if you are somebody who is not getting any kind of value addition from the distributor, then you should consider putting your money in a direct plan.
And this is something that happens in perpetuity, right? As opposed to going to someone and saying, hey, you know what, give me advice and help me put a list of mutual funds that I can invest in. You're essentially paying that distribution fee on an ongoing basis for as long as you're holding those funds. So it's cumulative over a period of time.
Just to add one.
Yeah. Please
add one thing to Alex. If you look at like as your SIP continues for 10 years, 11 years, 12 years, you would notice your SIP per month, which is going as a new 10,000 rupees per month, is almost equivalent to the agent's commission for the year.
Yeah, that's a fair point. So you've explained the monetary aspect of this very well, I would think. And it does make sense, especially if you're taking your own calls. And I'm guessing people tuned into this program are trying to do exactly that. So it makes sense to go direct. Having said that, I want to understand how does one make the transition? Because I think a lot of people who invest, for example, directly into equity, have brokerage accounts and they utilize those very same brokerage accounts to buy into mutual fund schemes as well. So there is, like you said, a convenience factor to this. What if they want to make the switch now from regular to direct? There is a cost involved. There is a tax involved, right?
Yep. So there is definitely cost involved, and one can always be mindful of the fact that if one has discovered that the platform or the brokerage that you are investing on your own from into a mutual fund, then if there is no validation, then at least the new investments can start flowing in direct plans instead of continuing on regular plans. That's number one. Second, if people who are watching this show and want to understand, are they somebody who's willing to kind of take this switch and benefit from the process? One ways to look at is how much of your investments are out of kind of tax implications. So if you are somebody who's investing in mutual fund for long periods of time, there is a possibility that you would have kind of invested for enough where you are now going to pay long-term capital gains tax instead of short-term capital gain tax. And if you're paying long-term capital gains tax, that means you would actually have 1 lakh rupees of free kind of investment redemption possible. So if you book 1 lakh rupees of capital gains in every financial year, you basically don't have to pay any tax on it. So if you redeem enough units so that your profit is capped at only 1 lakh rupees, then the tax implication of moving from regular direct is actually zero. Yeah, and what you can do is your further SIPs and actually can continue flowing into direct. And if you're somebody who is not kind of bothered about one-time tax cost, because as we can see, a 10,000 rupee SIP over 10 year actually can result into 1 lakh extra income for yourself. If you're not bothered about it and it's a small amount for you, you can consider switching all your existing investments into direct plans as well. So if you come to ET Money or any kind of apps like these, a lot of these people provide a feature where you can upload your mutual fund transaction statement, and at ET Money we allow you to even track your investments completely free of charge. So the regular plans that you have, you can actually avail a feature called one tap switch to direct feature, where we on your behalf would be actually sending a request to mutual fund companies, where you can basically just switch your existing regular plan units into direct plan units without redemption actually, and money not hitting your bank account as such. And it's just simple process of converting. It's a very easy and painless process, if I can use that word.
Absolutely. And in fact, I think in a situation, Santosh, where there are small losses in a portfolio based on what we're seeing in terms of volatility, now would be the time to make that switch, because you can utilize those losses also to set off future capital gains. And we should talk about this in the future. Of course, tax harvesting is an interesting conversation to have. Thank you so much for taking the time. It's been an insightful conversation as always, and look forward to the next one.
Thanks, Alex.